Former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon is expressing regret amid fallout over the explosive new book on President Trump's White House. In the book, Bannon was quoted about a meeting at Trump Tower in 2016 between the president's son, Don Jr., and a Russian lawyer. He called it, quote, treasonous. That set off a series of attacks by the president, who has taken to calling Bannon, quote, sloppy Steve. Now Bannon is clarifying his remarks, but not denying them. In a statement released Sunday, Bannon says his comments were aimed at Paul Manafort, who had knowledge of how Russians operate when he attended the campaign meeting. He goes on to say, quote, I regret that my delay in responding to the inaccurate reporting regarding Don Jr. has diverted attention from the president's historical accomplishments. The author of the book, Michael Wolff, is defending his work. He sat down today with CBS This Morning to discuss the future of the Trump presidency.
The people in the White House are like everybody else in the country. What's going to happen here? We don't know from day to day. This is for them, as for everyone, an extraordinary experience. And I think that they certainly question what's going to happen here, like everybody else.
Erin Delmore is a senior political correspondent for Bustle. Erin, thanks so much for being with us. So Steve Bannon is expressing regret, but has the damage already been done?
Bannon is expressing regret. What he's not saying is, I'm sorry. You've got to remember what figure Steve Bannon is and what role he's had in this administration. He was the president's chief strategist. He was the architect behind some of the president's more forceful policies, including the travel ban at the very beginning of the president's term. He was also someone who told the president not to retreat after he said that there was blame to be had on both sides during the violence in Charlottesville. So we don't often see contrition from Steve Bannon. In that way, this statement is very unique, but he stopped short of saying, I'm sorry. He said I was misquoted. He said I was wrong. The president has my allegiance. You see him edging back into the president's good graces, but we don't know yet if he'll get there.
No, because all of this has also forced the president to defend his mental stability. Is this a storyline that Republicans are going to be grappling with for a while?
If this were one juicy tidbit in a book by an author who's going to sell so many copies, it would hold the news cycle for a day or two. The problem is that this allegation echoes a year's worth of reporting and another year's worth on the campaign trail. This idea that the president is someone who doesn't willingly take in information, someone who doesn't have the confidence of his aides. It's been reported far longer than this book's been out, and that's why the White House is having such a hard time tamping that down.
Now, in addition, CBS News has learned that the president's lawyers are meeting with special counsel Robert Mueller's team to discuss an interview with the president that may be imminent. What more do we know about this?
Well, there are a couple factors that are at play here. Certainly, Mueller's team wants to sit down with the president, but there are a few sticking points. There are the logistics of the interview. Where will it be held? How long will it be? What topics can be covered? There's a question of the legality when it's appropriate to sit down and interview a president. And then there's a question of the format. And this one is particularly interesting because Trump's team has offered some alternatives to a traditional one-on-one sit-down. That would be something like a written statement or signing an affidavit saying that there's no wrongdoing or no collusion. That likely will not be enough for Robert Mueller because as reporters, we know how important it is to sit down with somebody, to read their body language, to have their eye contact, and to make sure that those are the words coming out of their own mouth and not that of their lawyers. That's why it doesn't feel as though a written statement would suffice.
Do we have any clues as to what Robert Mueller's team would want to get out of the president in such an interview?
There are a couple of indications what they're focusing on. The reporting we saw out of the New York Times last week that President Trump himself asked the White House counsel, Don McGahn, to intervene and to ask Jeff Sessions not to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. That's important because that gets you into the president's mindset as this investigation was unfolding. There have also been memos that the president originally drafted right before he fired Jim Comey. Again, that's an insight into where his head was versus the revisions that came out after that final statement. If they're looking for obstruction of justice, they absolutely want to know what the president's intention was. That's what makes that charge so hard to stick. And of course, they're still looking at collusion.
And what makes an interview so potentially dangerous. All right. So let's switch gears for a moment here and talk about immigration. A group of bipartisan lawmakers are set to sit down with the White House, hash some things out. The White House is asking for $18 billion, is that right?
That's
for
right.
a border wall. Democrats are saying this is not going to happen. Are we just at a place of no return here?
You and I both flinch at that number because it's an enormous amount of money. And while that is the down payment on the wall over the next 10 years, that's not all the money President Trump is asking for customs and border patrol enforcement and protection. That comes up to $33 billion over the next 10 years. Now, that's a hard pill to swallow, not just for congressional Democrats, but also for congressional Republicans who are hardliners when it comes to the budget and how money is spent within the government. They're back to the same sticking points. Democrats want to legalize DACA, so do a whole lot of Republicans. I've spoken to them about this. But in exchange, the Trump administration wants not only border security, but the wall. And the wall is a non-starter for Democrats. And so we're back.
And so the wall is a non-starter for President Trump, apparently. Oh, wow. So could this lead to a government shutdown?
That would be the worst case outcome, not only for both parties, but also for Americans. A government shutdown is an ugly affair. We saw it in 2013. Not only are workers furloughed without pay, but national parks begin to close down. Access is denied. Benefits get stalled. If you really go down that road, you could see TSA workers impacted.
Sure.
If it goes on long enough, the country can grind to a halt. If it happens for 1 or 2 days, you can come back from it. But the political damage is done. Republicans control Congress and the Senate. If the government shuts down, they would own responsibility for that, and that is a tough pill to swallow heading into the 2018 midterms.
Sure, and when it comes to the immigration reform, there is a little bit of a timeline here.
Yeah.
I mean, starting in March, people are going to be deported. Dreamers are going to start being sent back home.
And your point is one that was lost in the beginning because President Trump said, Congress, it's on you to legalize DACA. You have 6 months to do it. Go. He never said or what. And so a lot of people took that deadline as fluid. But we saw that letter from some of the most recent secretaries of Homeland Security saying that these people, and there are 700,000 of them, will begin to have their legal status in question. Maybe their work permits won't go through. Maybe they'll have to leave the country. But come March 5th, there's going to be some real insecurity around hundreds of thousands of people.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears again. There's a new report out. The president's workday, interestingly, goes from about 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., with the rest of that being called executive time.
Yeah.
What's happening during that executive time?
So it's interesting to drill down into executive time. If you ask Sarah Sanders, she'll say he's on the phone with members of his administration. He's on the phone with heads of state. It's productive time that he's using to be president of the United States. But what we know the president does is tweet a whole lot. We know he's up early. We know he's watching TV because his tweets directly reference a lot of the programming that's on concurrently. And so the criticism here has been that the president's workday is not only short, but that it's shorter than it was at the beginning of his term. And for me, that's what's notable.
Yes.
Because he's a first-time politician. He's a first-time candidate. There's a lot of curiosity around how he does this job. He's used to running his own business and calling his own shots, but he's not working for himself. He's working for the American people now. And everything that goes on in the West Wing revolves around him. That's why this is key.
Absolutely. All right, now let's talk about Oprah, since a lot of people are talking about Oprah. She made a rousing speech at the Golden Globes last night, and many people are saying, hey, what about a presidential run
For 2020.
What are your thoughts?
So I wonder if we will end up talking about this in earnest after today. I think that it's a really fun thing to springboard off of after such a riveting speech like the one she made last night. I wonder sometimes whether she wants to be president, but I don't wonder whether she can. This past election has shown that you don't need prior political experience, and in fact, that can be seen as something that hurts your chances of being president.
Well, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand did have something to say about it. We're going to run that.
I'm really grateful to what she said, and I think she's a real leader, and I think her voice is powerful and important, and whatever she wants to do, she should do.
Sounds like the senator is sort of hedging a little bit.
The senator is somebody who could benefit from not only Oprah getting in the ring, but maybe even more importantly, Oprah not getting in the ring.
Right.
And instead putting all that momentum and force and money and celebrity that she has behind another candidate. Who are the likely Democrats? Somebody like Kirsten Gillibrand, who has voiced so many of the same issues and concerns as Oprah. Or somebody like Cory Booker, who is famously close with not only Oprah and her friends, but also Hollywood circles. It would be more interesting to see Oprah as a kingmaker in the next election, see where she wants to put her support.
Behind someone who does have a history of public service, perhaps.
And like she did with President Obama. There's
Absolutely.
a track record.
Erin Delmore, thank you so much
Thanks, Tanya.
for seeing us.